It started with the kind of moment that makes you freeze, even if you don't want to. The rancher had been moving around like any other day, not thinking about anything unusual, when he suddenly felt something strange, something he couldn't explain. And the first thing he noticed was the simplest, yet most shocking thing. He couldn't close his legs, not even a little. They were stuck open, stiff, almost locked in place. When I first heard that, I immediately imagined the confusion he must have felt. You don't expect your own body to betray you out of nowhere. It's the kind of problem you can't ignore, no matter how tough you are. He tried shifting his weight, taking a step, adjusting his jeans, anything that might help, but nothing changed. The space between his legs stayed frozen, almost like someone was holding him apart. And the part that really pulled me in was that he didn't feel any sharp pain. No injury, no warning, just this gripping sensation, like something was pulling from below and refusing to let go. That's what made the moment so unsettling. When something feels wrong but you don't know asterisk why asterisk, your mind starts racing with possibilities you don't even want to think about. I could almost picture the look on his face, part confusion, part fear, trying to understand what on earth was happening to him. And honestly, if I were in his place, that first frozen second would have been enough to send chills down my spine. It was clear that whatever this was, it wasn't normal, and it definitely wasn't small. The day had started in the most ordinary way possible, the kind of morning that doesn't give you even the smallest hint that something unusual is waiting for you. The rancher woke up before sunrise, just like he always did. That slow blue light was still settling across the fields. The air was cool, the kind that feels clean when you breathe it in. He fed the animals, checked the fences, walked the same dirt paths he walked 1,000 times. Everything felt familiar, steady, predictable. And maybe that's why what happened next felt so unreal, because it broke into a moment that should have been peaceful. As I followed along with this story, I kept thinking how strange it is that life never warns you. One minute you're doing something simple, almost mindless, and the next minute everything turns upside down. For him, it started as just a slight discomfort, a tiny tug between his legs, something so small he didn't even pay attention to it at first. He just kept working, assuming it would go away. But it didn't. It grew stronger, pulling tighter, almost like something was drawing his legs apart, slowly but forcefully. He shifted his stance and the feeling only got worse. He tried turning his hips, bending a little, nothing helped. The tension didn't fade. It actually increased, and suddenly his whole body felt off balance. That's when confusion settled in. And honestly, I can imagine that moment so clearly. You try something once, then again, then a third time, and each time you expect it to fix itself. But for him, it didn't. The feeling kept spreading, from discomfort to something he couldn't ignore. He walked a few steps, and even that felt wrong. His legs weren't moving the way they should. He wasn't in pain, but his body felt controlled by something else. And that's when he realized he couldn't bring his legs together. They stayed separated, locked wide enough apart that every step felt unnatural. It was like his muscles weren't listening to him, or like something was physically blocked, holding him open. What made it more unsettling was where he was standing. Out in the wide-open ranch, with nothing but grass, dirt, and animals around, you expect problems to come from obvious things. An injured animal, a broken fence, machinery acting up. But your own body, that's the one thing you never expect to turn on you. And in a place so quiet, so familiar, the weirdness of the moment hits even harder. There's no noise, no distraction, nothing to blur the shock. He looked around, hoping maybe he'd stepped on something or snagged himself on something he didn't see. But there was nothing, just empty space and open land. So he brushed his jeans with his hands, thinking maybe the fabric was caught or twisted. But the denim moved freely. Nothing was stuck. Nothing was tangled. And that's when the worry started rising in him, slow at first, then sharper. If you've ever felt something go wrong in your body for the first time, you know the exact feeling he had. That moment where your brain jumps from calm logic to fast, panicked guessing. He wondered if it was a cramp. maybe a muscle pulling in the wrong direction, but cramps come with pain and this didn't. It felt more like pressure, like something was down there doing something. That thought alone would have sent my mind spiraling, and I could almost sense the panic he was trying to suppress. He glanced around again. The ranch was still silent, the air still calm, as if the world hadn't noticed that something was wrong with him. He tried closing his legs again, nothing. They wouldn't move inward even an inch. He could move them apart more easily than normal, but bringing them together was impossible. At this point, even I felt uncomfortable imagining it. A body part that simply refuses to cooperate is terrifying in its own way. You can't see the problem, you can't predict it. You can't even be sure it's not something dangerous. All you have is that tight, pulling sensation that keeps reminding you something is happening. Something real. Something you can't explain. He tried walking a little farther, but his steps looked awkward and uneven. Every movement felt like a challenge. And he couldn't stop thinking about the first tug he felt that morning, the tiny hint he ignored. Now it had grown into something that took complete control of his lower body. That's when he stopped moving entirely, stood still, took a breath, and prepared himself to inspect what was going on. But before reaching down, he hesitated. And honestly, I get that. You don't just reach down between your legs in the open ranch unless you're absolutely sure something is very wrong. He looked around once more, checking if anyone was close enough to see him. The place was empty, completely empty, just him and whatever was happening beneath his jeans. The breeze moved across the field, brushing against him like nothing was wrong with the world. And that contrast, the calm ranch against the chaos inside him, made everything feel even more intense. He finally decided he couldn't wait anymore. Whatever this was, he needed to find out, needed to touch it, needed to feel what was stopping him from moving like a normal person. But as his hands moved downward, he felt a strange heaviness in his stomach, like he already knew the answer wouldn't be simple. I found myself holding my breath just thinking about that moment. The uncertainty, the fear, the curiosity, and the strange reality that something unbelievable might be waiting to be discovered. The rancher's day had turned from calm and ordinary into something he would remember forever, and he didn't even know the full truth yet. Everything built up to that next moment, the moment where he finally reached down to understand what was happening. And as strange as it sounds, this was just the beginning of the unbelievable discovery waiting for him. The fear didn't hit him all at once. It came in waves, sneaking into his thoughts little by little until it was impossible to ignore. At first, he kept trying to convince himself that this was just temporary, maybe something silly he'd laugh about later. But the longer he stood there, the more he realized that whatever was happening wasn't going away. His legs were still locked open, still refusing to come together, and the tightness between them felt stronger with each passing second. He felt trapped inside his own body, and that's a kind of fear you can't really prepare for. He shifted his weight again, hoping maybe a different position would help. But even that tiny movement felt strange, unnatural. His legs didn't follow the pattern he was used to. They moved stiffly, like something invisible was controlling the space between them. Every attempt to close them made the tension grow, pulling harder, almost warning him not to push it. And that's when the worry in his mind started sharpening into something deeper. He tried to take a step back, just one simple step, but his balance felt off. His legs were too far apart, his center of gravity thrown sideways. He looked down almost as if he expected to see something wrong on the outside, ripped jeans, a trapped object, anything. But everything looked normal. Nothing seemed out of place. And somehow that made it even worse. When a problem is invisible, you imagine everything. His breathing grew heavier, not from pain but from uncertainty. He began replaying the morning in his head, trying to remember every movement he made, every place he walked, every animal he passed. Did something latch onto him? Did he step on something? Did he somehow injure himself without noticing? Each possibility felt less believable than the last, and the silence of the ranch didn't help. It made everything feel like a moment suspended in time, just him and this strange, growing tension. As a viewer, I couldn't stop imagining the rising panic in his chest, the kind that starts small, then spreads, making your heartbeat echo in your own ears. There's nothing more unsettling than realizing your body is doing something you can't explain. And out on a ranch, far away from the nearest help, the fear hits even harder. He wasn't just confused, he was isolated with that confusion. He tried calming himself, took a slow breath, told himself to think logically. But logic doesn't work well when your legs feel like they belong to someone else. He tested his movements again, lifting one leg, trying to bring it in. It didn't budge, not even a little. The muscles tightened against him as if they were protecting something or responding to something he couldn't see. He reached down and ran his hand along his jeans, feeling the fabric and checking for any unusual bulges or shapes. Everything felt normal to the touch, but beneath the denim, something felt wrong. He could sense it, even if he couldn't identify it. It was like his instincts were shouting at him while his mind was still trying to stay rational. Then a rush of questions hit him. Was it an internal issue, something medical, something living, something attached? His mind bounced from one idea to the next, none of them comforting. And I could almost feel that same tension building inside me as I followed along. Each second stretched longer, and the urge to know the truth became stronger. The rancher hesitated before reaching down further. There's a line between curiosity and fear, and he was standing right on it. He needed answers, but he didn't want to face the possibility that the answer might be worse than the feeling. The unknown can be terrifying, especially when it has control over your body. He swallowed hard and forced himself to focus. Ignoring it wasn't an option anymore. He needed to understand what was happening. But before he finally reached between his legs, another wave of fear hit him, stronger than the rest. What if he found something he wasn't ready for? What if the problem wasn't an object, but his own body malfunctioning? What if something had happened without him noticing? The fear of discovery can be just as powerful as the fear of the unknown. He looked around once more, scanning the empty land, the quiet fields, the open sky. Everything looked peaceful, calm, untouched. Nothing in the environment hinted at danger. And that contrast, calm outside, chaos inside, made the situation feel unreal. He was standing in a place that had always been predictable, yet here he was, unable to control his own legs. His heart was beating faster now, his chest rising and falling more noticeably. He felt the cool breeze brush against his skin, but it did nothing to ease the tightness between his legs. The pressure felt more focused now, as if whatever was causing it was preparing itself too, almost reacting to his movements. He took another breath, deeper this time, then slowly bent his knees, hoping a change in posture might loosen the tension. But the exact opposite happened. The moment he bent down even slightly, the pulling sensation intensified sharply, spreading upward in a way that made him straighten back up immediately. His eyes widened in shock. This wasn't a simple cramp. This wasn't a minor issue. Something was actively influencing his body. And by now, even I felt invested in whatever he was experiencing. The way the tension grew at just the wrong moments, the way the fear built without any clear explanation, it made the whole situation feel eerie and unsettling. Like the story was leading up to something big, something unexpected, something that didn't belong in a normal day on a ranch. The rancher finally understood one thing: he couldn't delay this any longer. The sensation wasn't fading, it wasn't weakening, it was growing, and ignoring it would only make things worse. He steadied himself, letting the air settle in his lungs, and prepared to reach down and finally confront whatever was happening to him. But before he moved his hand, he felt something else, something faint, something shifting. It wasn't pain, but it wasn't normal either. It was the kind of feeling that tells you something is changing, something you can't see but can definitely sense. And that tiny shift was enough to send another surge of adrenaline through him. Everything was leading him to one unavoidable moment. The moment he would finally reach down and discover the truth. And even though he didn't know what he was about to find, he could feel it. Whatever it was, it wouldn't be ordinary. Not even close. He stood there with his breath caught somewhere between his chest and his throat. Reaching down felt like crossing a line he couldn't step back from, but at this point, he didn't have a choice. The tightness between his legs wasn't letting up. It wasn't weakening. It was almost responding to him. Like the moment he hesitated, it tightened just enough to remind him this wasn't his imagination. That alone made his fingers tremble slightly as he lowered his hand toward the source of the strange sensation. He moved slowly at first, almost too slowly, because every inch his hand traveled down his torso felt like he was walking deeper into something he didn't fully understand yet. The morning air felt cooler around his fingers as they reached the top of his jeans. He slipped his thumb under the waistband, feeling the fabric stretch a little. His other hand braced against his hip to keep him steady since his stance still felt awkward and wide. For a moment, he paused again. Not because he wanted to, but because something inside him begged him to think before touching whatever was down there. It wasn't fear of pain. It was fear of the unknown, fear of feeling something he wasn't prepared to feel. His heart kept thudding, each beat matching the tension that spread through his body. Even as a viewer, I could feel the weight of that moment, the way uncertainty makes every movement feel like a risk. Then slowly, he slid his hand deeper, letting his palm rest over the center of the strange pulling sensation. At first, he felt nothing unusual, just the normal shape of his jeans, the warmth of his own body. But then his fingers brushed against something that didn't belong. Something that wasn't fabric, wasn't skin, wasn't anything he had felt before. It was faint at first, like a small raised surface beneath the denim. But as he pressed a little more, the shape became clearer, more defined. His breath hitched. He froze, hands still, fingers barely touching the unfamiliar shape. He didn't push further. Not yet. His mind scrambled, trying to make sense of it. Was it an object? Something stuck? Something attached? He felt a pulse of confusion and disbelief wash over him. For a second, he even wondered if he was hallucinating, if stress or exhaustion was making him imagine textures that weren't there. But when he gently traced the outline again, the shape didn't disappear. And this time it moved, just a tiny shift. So small he might have doubted it if he hadn't felt it directly against his fingertips. The sensation wasn't from him. It wasn't his muscles twitching. It was something else. Something under his jeans that responded when he touched it. The movement sent a jolt of shock through him, making him yank his hand back instinctively. He stumbled slightly, trying to regain his balance with legs that still wouldn't come together. His breath grew shaky, his body tense. He stared at the ground, as if expecting to see something there, something crawling or clinging. But nothing was visible. The world around him stayed perfectly normal. The only strange thing in the entire ranch was happening underneath his own clothing. He swallowed hard, forcing himself to breathe. The fear inside him had grown sharper now, but so had the need for clarity. He couldn't walk away from this. Whatever was gripping him wasn't going to release him until he understood it. So after a few seconds, he steadied his hands again and reached down once more, this time more prepared, more determined, even though his nerves were screaming. He pressed his palm against the spot again, slower, more cautiously. The shape was still there, firm beneath the fabric and larger than he initially thought. It wasn't flat. It wasn't round. It felt irregular, almost like a cluster or an object with edges. He explored the outer boundary with his fingertips, each pass revealing more detail, more confusion. The texture wasn't smooth. It had ridges, maybe even small segments like something made of multiple parts. Then just as he pressed near what felt like an edge, he felt that tiny movement again, but this time it was stronger, more deliberate, not random, not accidental. He jerked his hand away again but didn't step back. He couldn't. His legs were still locked open, held by whatever this thing was. The only way out was through understanding, and the only way to understand was by touching it again. Even I, listening to this, felt the tension coil tighter. That kind of moment where your curiosity fights with your fear, where you want to look but also want to look away. But he didn't stop. His hand returned to the spot a third time, but now with a different mindset. Instead of waiting for the shape to react, he pressed more firmly, trying to identify it. The sensation was so foreign he couldn't match it to anything he knew. And then he felt something unmistakable, a slight vibration, a faint buzzing deep under the fabric. It traveled against his palm like something alive. His mouth went dry. His pulse hammered in his ears. He pressed again, more carefully this time, trying to confirm what he felt. The vibration returned stronger, traveling upward and outward before fading again. It wasn't his imagination. It wasn't a muscle. It wasn't a cramp or a spasm. Something under his jeans was moving on its own. The air around him suddenly felt different, as if the world was leaning in, waiting for what he'd discover next. His hands trembled slightly, but he forced them to stay steady. He needed to feel more. He needed to understand the shape and the movement. His fingers traced the object again, this time pushing slightly under the denim to feel its surface more directly. It felt segmented, almost rough in places, smoother in others. His mind raced, trying to categorize the texture to link it to anything familiar, but nothing matched, nothing made sense. And before he could even process the next thought, the shape beneath his fingers shifted again, this time unmistakably responding to his touch. A slow, creeping motion that traveled sideways. And in that exact moment he realized something else. The thing under his jeans wasn't just moving, it was adjusting itself, positioning itself, preparing for something. And the rancher, standing frozen with his legs locked apart, could feel that truth settle into his bones. Something unbelievable was waiting for him to discover it. And for the first time, he understood that whatever it was, he wasn't in control of the moment anymore. His fingers hovered in the air for a moment, suspended above the fabric, as if his hand didn't want to go back down no matter how much his mind insisted. The thing beneath his jeans had just shifted, slowly, deliberately, and the memory of that movement clung to him. It wasn't random. It wasn't accidental. It felt like a response, like whatever was trapped against him was aware of being touched. That realization alone was enough to send a cold rush through his spine, but he knew he couldn't stop now. He had to find out what it was. He lowered his hand again with a kind of cautious bravery, like someone reaching into dark water without knowing what might swim up and brush against their skin. His palm settled over the same spot, and the texture beneath the denim felt even stranger now. It wasn't stiff. It wasn't soft. It had weight. It had shape. And as he pressed more firmly, he could feel distinct segments, small ridges, a curved edge, something that felt almost like tiny hooks or gripping points. It was the kind of shape that suggested a living, structured body. But then came the moment he wasn't prepared for. Just as his hand traveled along what he thought was the top edge of the thing, it moved again, this time faster, with a ripple that traveled across its length before settling. Not enough to hurt, but enough to make him gasp and jerk his hand back for the third time. He stood there, breathing hard, staring down as if he expected something to burst through the fabric at any second. But nothing did. Everything looked completely normal from the outside. Just a pair of jeans on a rancher standing in the middle of an empty field. But underneath, something alive was pressing against him. The silence around him grew heavier. Even the wind seemed to pause, like the world was waiting. He took another breath, shaky, but steady enough to keep him in control, and he slowly reached down again, this time with his fingers closer together, ready to trap the shape between them. He needed to know what he was dealing with. Fear or not, he had to understand. His fingertips brushed the surface of the thing again, and this time he pressed firmly enough to feel the full outline of it. And that's when everything suddenly clicked into place in his mind, not with logic but with instinct. The segmented texture, the slight vibration, the way it gripped onto him, the way it shifted when touched. He knew that feel. He had felt it before, just not like this. Not trapped under his clothes, not in a place where it had no business being. It was some kind of creature, His thoughts raced wildly at the realization. There were plenty of critters on a ranch, bugs, snakes, anything you could imagine, but nothing that should have been able to wedge itself into that spot without him noticing. Nothing that should have been able to latch onto him so firmly that it controlled the way his legs moved. He swallowed hard and pressed again, this time searching for the edges, following them with slow, cautious movements. The creature felt longer than he expected. Not enormous, but not small either. Maybe the length of his hand, maybe more. Its body felt firm, not squishy, solid, and the way it responded to pressure made his heart race. Every time he pressed on a certain part, it reacted, shifting slightly, tightening its grip, adjusting its position as though trying to find a better hold. He steadied himself and slid his hand lower, tracing the underside of the shape. That's when he felt something even stranger. A slight curve, almost like the bend of a tail or a hooked end, pressed against the inside of his thigh. And that realization made his stomach twist. Whatever this was, it wasn't just resting there. It was anchored to him, clinging, holding on with a grip that explained perfectly why he couldn't close his legs. The creature's body seemed wedged between the fabric of his jeans and the skin beneath, pressing outward in a way that forced his legs apart. He didn't know how long it had been there or how it got there, but one thing was clear: it wasn't leaving on its own. As a viewer, I could practically feel the tension choking the air. The rancher's fear must have been overwhelming, but mixed with that fear was something else: determination. He wasn't the kind of man who panicked easily. Life on a ranch hardens you, but even he couldn't deny the frantic beat of his heart as he realized just how close this creature was to the most vulnerable part of his body. He forced himself not to yank back or act impulsively. Sudden movements could make it cling tighter or trigger some kind of defense. He needed to think, needed to act with caution. So he touched it again, gently this time with the lightest pressure, and mapped out the shape with his fingertips. Every ridge made sense now, every movement, every tremor. And as he traced downward one more time, something unexpected happened. The creature shifted again, but this time it lifted slightly, as though adjusting or preparing to move. He felt its body lift from one side and settle back down with a subtle but unmistakable thump. He froze, breath caught, heart hammering. The creature wasn't just attached. It was preparing to reposition itself. He realized then that he didn't have much time. Whatever this thing was, it had the ability to move, grip, and react. If it decided to crawl deeper or tighten further, the situation could become a whole lot worse. So he steadied his nerves, knowing the next move he made would have to be deliberate. His hand returned, fingers trembling but ready. He slipped the tips beneath the fabric as much as he could, trying to wedge a bit of space between his skin and the creature's body. It wasn't easy. The grip was strong, almost suction-like, but he kept pressing, kept searching for a weak point, a corner he could peel away. Then finally, his fingertips found something. A small gap, a loose edge, a spot where the creature wasn't attached as tightly. His pulse surged with a mix of fear and hope. This was his chance. He pressed into that opening, trying to lift the creature or at least loosen its hold. As soon as he applied pressure, the creature reacted sharply, curling its body or shifting its weight. The movement shot through him, a powerful reminder of how alive and aware it was. But he didn't stop. He pressed harder, pushing into that gap with a determination fueled by pure adrenaline. And then, in one chilling, unforgettable moment, he felt the creature start to detach, slowly, reluctantly, like something peeling away from his skin. The unbelievable truth was finally revealing itself, and the rancher could feel it, inch by inch, separating from him, preparing to come free. The creature started to peel away so slowly that every second felt stretched thin, like time itself didn't want to move forward. The rancher's breath stayed locked in his chest as he felt that first subtle lift. The way the creature's grip loosened just enough for him to sense the skin underneath finally breathing again. But even as it detached, he could feel how unwilling it was to let go. It clung with a strange, sticky pressure, as if it had anchored itself deep and was now resisting the pull. That kind of slow detachment felt unnatural, like pulling a suction cup off glass, but warmer and alive. His fingers shook, but he forced himself to stay steady. He pressed into the gap he had found earlier, gently widening it inch by inch. The sensation was unbearable, half fear, half adrenaline, because every tiny shift the creature made sent a ripple through his body. Sometimes it tensed, gripping harder for a moment. Sometimes it relaxed, sliding slightly as if trying to find a new hold. And every movement reminded him how dangerously close it was to the most sensitive part of his body. But he kept going, pushing deeper into that gap, prying just enough to weaken its hold. The creature squirmed, and he felt its segmented body shift sideways under his fingers, almost like it was trying to escape his touch rather than escape the location it had latched onto. That reaction alone made him clench his jaw. His instinct screamed to step back or jerk away, but his legs were still spread wide and stuck. The only path out was forward, through the discomfort, through the fear, through the slow, awful peeling sensation as the thing loosened its grip. Then it happened again, that dull vibration, pulsing through the creature's body. This time it was stronger, almost like a warning or a final attempt to hold on. The buzz traveled down his thigh and up toward his stomach, making his muscles tense involuntarily. But the vibration didn't scare him now. It motivated him. It told him he was doing something that mattered, something that was working. He pushed harder, and suddenly one section of the creature's body snapped free, not loudly, not violently, but with a soft release that made his stomach drop. There was a difference in the pressure immediately. The pull between his legs weakened slightly. Not enough to move freely yet, but enough for him to feel a shift. Enough for him to know he was making progress. As a viewer, I could practically feel that wave of relief mixing with panic. It's that moment when you know something is breaking loose, but you also know the hardest part is still coming. The rancher paused just for a second, gathering himself, letting his breathing settle. Then he reached again, sliding his hand under the loosened section, gripping gently but more confidently now. This time when he pulled, the creature reacted sharply. Its body wriggled with a sudden burst of movement, fast enough to make him flinch. But he didn't let go. He tightened his hold, fingers digging in just enough to maintain his leverage without crushing it. The creature twisted, its segmented body pressing and sliding against him in a way that made goosebumps crawl up his arms. But he didn't loosen his grip. He pulled again. The sound wasn't audible, but he felt it. A soft, sticky tearing sensation as another section detached. His jeans shifted, his skin breathed again, and he felt the pressure between his legs fade even more. For the first time since the whole nightmare started, he could almost bring his legs inward. Not fully, not comfortably, but the resistance had weakened. The creature was losing its hold. He didn't give it a chance to tighten again. With a deep breath and a burst of determination, he reached under the loosened section with both hands now, using the awkward angle to pry the creature upward. It writhed, twisting violently, but he held on. His fingers slid across its ridges, gripping whatever he could. And then, finally, he felt the last sticky connection give way. The creature came free. He pulled it out from under his jeans, holding it at arm's length the moment it left his body. His eyes widened, and even from the story alone I could imagine the shock he felt. What he held wasn't tiny. It wasn't harmless. It wasn't even something he recognized right away. It was long, segmented, thick enough to have real weight in his hands. Its body shimmered faintly with a strange, organic sheen. Its underside had tiny hooked grips, dozens of them, each one clearly designed to latch on and hold with surprising strength. The creature writhed in his hands, twisting and pulsing like it wasn't fully sure it had been removed. Its body curled and flexed, the segments shifting in a slow, unsettling rhythm. He could feel the faint vibrations under his palms, the same ones he had felt earlier through his jeans. It was alive, fully alive, and it had been attached to him so firmly that it forced his legs apart. He stared at it, breathing hard, trying to process what he was seeing. The creature looked like something between a massive insect and a strange parasite, something that didn't belong in the world he knew, something he would have never expected to find on himself, let alone in such an intimate, vulnerable place. But even as he held it, the ranch wasn't silent anymore. He could hear his own heartbeat loud in his ears, hear the creature's faint vibrations, hear his breath shaking as he tried to steady it. The world around him felt different now, sharper, more alert, because no part of him had been prepared to discover something so shocking, so alive, so unbelievably close to him without his knowledge. He dropped the creature onto the dirt, and the moment it hit the ground, it curled and twisted, still pulsing, still moving, still reacting. He stumbled back, finally able to bring his legs closer together, though the muscles felt strange and weak from being forced apart for so long. He stared down at it, chest rising and falling, trying to make sense of what he had just pulled off his own body. The creature twitched, then stretched out slightly as if adjusting to its new surroundings. It didn't rush away. It didn't jump. It simply lay there, alive and undeniable. And the rancher, still trying to steady himself, could only watch, unable to look away, unable to forget the feeling of every segment that had clung to him, unable to shake the truth of what had just happened.